Welcome to the Long Take Review, where four college professors talk film, providing insight, not assigning homework. I'm your host, Jen Sobchak-Bankard, and I'm here with two co-hosts who have been revoked due to piracy. First, he's always been in Park City, but is considering a move to Boulder or Cincinnati. It's PT McNiff. How's it going, PT?
I did write out the whole thing about the piracy. I didn't realize. I read my intro quote and Antonio's. I didn't realize you were going to reference it right beforehand.
Right.
So
it's big news.
So anyway, my quote has been withdrawn due to piracy. Was going to be my bit, but okay. But anyway, I'm doing well. Jen, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited to talk about the movies that we're going to talk about in a minute. And he's just looking to get bought by Netflix. It's Antonio Elefano. How are you doing, Antonio? For the record, I originally had bought by A24, and then I figured that's Greg's. It's Greg's. We got to leave that for him.
Yeah, that's fair. I'm doing all right, Jen. I'm just gonna take our dog into this strange building we just drove to, but you should just stay in the car and not worry about it, okay?
Amazing. Thank you. So listeners, those were all references to our topic for today, the Sundance Film Festival, which we all had the chance to participate in virtually. So Sundance is one of the festivals that, post-COVID introduced an online component, and they've since kept that up. And so we didn't go in person to the festival, but we got to see some films at home. And so that's what we're here today to talk about. So Sundance is kind of, in terms of the awards race, is always in a really awkward place because it usually starts when Oscar nominations come out and is technically kicking off next year's award season before this one's even finished. So I know like in terms of the rhythms of our show and award season, it is kind of an odd diversion, but that's not to say it's not a big part of the Oscar race. The breakouts from this festival historically have gone on to receive Oscars. So recent examples are Coda, Past Lives, and this year A Real Pain, which did not make it into Best Picture, but is still very much present at the Oscars this year. Since many of these films won't be available to the general public for a little while, or some of them actually haven't even been bought yet, so don't have plans for distribution. So we're going to keep this episode completely spoiler-free. So that means that we'll talk about what we thought about these films and kind of introduce the premise of them without giving away key details of the plot. So no spoilers here. Don't worry, you're safe. But first, PT, if listeners want to acquire us after listening to this episode, what can they do?
If they're not certain where they're going to be in the next few years, then they can just go and follow the Long Take Review wherever they get their podcasts. We host the feed on Jen's Substack at thelongtake.substack.com, but you can also find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, YouTube, and many more. You can also follow us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at the Long Take Review, and you can find us on Letterboxd. The account is at LTRpod. Or you can follow the hashtag LTRpod to see what each of us individually have been watching. Jen?
Thanks, PT. So I think our order of operations here is we're just going to kind of go around and share a movie that we saw, that we liked, that we want to talk about. And we'll probably do 2 each of those and then kind of open it up for general discussion or shout outs of other films that we didn't mention. So, Antonio, what's your first Sundance movie that you want to talk about?
So the first, I only saw 2, so that will make things very easy for me. So I went through the list. You were so kind to send us, lists of the ones that were available online, and I decided I wanted 2 different films. So I picked one that I thought, based on the premise, sounded kind of thrillery. That was incorrect. um, but it did have some virtues. It actually won. So the film is called Plain Clothes. It won a special jury prize, I think, for best ensemble cast. It stars an actor I didn't know named Tom Blythe. And basically the premise is he plays an undercover police officer in the 90s who lures gay men into mall bathrooms to basically entrap them. Um, and then in the course of his work, he falls in love with one of his marks, who's played by Russell Tovey. Um, so um, so again, I mean, I don't know, police and investigation, a sort of thing. That's why I sort of thought that that the pacing of it was going to be a little bit faster. Um, it was more of a character study, which is something that I enjoy watching. Um, and I thought Blythe and Tovey were very good. Russell Tovey is an actor. I think he's a really fantastic actor. Um, it won the ensemble award again. It's because even though the two of them, as you expect, are really excellent, there's also the actress who plays his mother, and there's an actor who plays his bigoted uncle, also played sort of big roles. So at first, when I heard that it won that prize, I was like, oh, that's interesting because I didn't necessarily think of it as a like a big ensemble piece like Conclave, for example. But the performances do elevate it. So you know, I thought there was sort of like one minor surprise along the way, but I think it sort of unfolded in the way that I sort of expected. But but I thought that it was still affecting and interesting to watch. So that was the first one that I saw. How about UPT?
Well, so with Jen, you didn't see this one.
I did not.
Okay, so there's no.
I heard good things.
Yes.
No one had anything bad to say about this movie. There weren't a ton of people who were like effusive about it, but I didn't hear any criticism.
Yeah. The only well, in hearing praise about it, and of course I act like Jen, I assume, has read like 30 articles and listened to like 7 podcasts. I listened to like a podcast episode and a half about the Sundance movies, and the things I heard about this one were, you know, the only negatives were the kind of preparing a defense for there may be people who think this is too, you know, simplistic in the representation of the LGBTQ community because it's a you know, cis white gay man in the 90s. It's like, is it really that hard for you? But like there was like, it was in the 90s, so it could be. So yeah, I've heard good things about this one, so I'm excited to see that at some point down the road. I'm gonna go with for my first one, I'm going to say the movie Love Brooklyn, which is a you know, very nice, just sort of romantic drama with some comedy elements mixed in. That is was directed by Rachel Abigail Holder in her directorial debut, and from a screenplay by Paul Zimmerman. And in the sort of Q&A afterwards, what seemed really interesting was that it was the script was written completely separate from the director. The script existed, and it was written by, you may be able to guess from the name Paul Zimmerman, it's a white guy who was writing about like a sort of a love triangle and some of the people around them in Brooklyn, and it was picked up by a Black woman director who made it like, I also want to make this a story about kind of Black lives in current day gentrifying Brooklyn. And I mean, maybe you know, I don't know where the line is, but you know, it was you know, it had this backdrop of Brooklyn as a changing space, and the neighborhoods that used to exist are maybe not able to sustain in the way that they have been. But that was very much in the background and kind of off to the side. And it really is just this story of 3 people living their lives and kind of bouncing off of each other. And, you know, it's to the degree that I think there's a stereotypical like Sundance movie of like, it is just a very kind of contained, quiet, adult drama of just sort of people living their lives. No like huge like, oh my gosh, like we're gonna save the city if we do this, or like the neighborhood is liberated now because of this. Like none of that happens. It is very much just like, you know, what's gonna happen with these people and what are the paths that they take. And it wasn't, you know, at a past lives level of just like, wow, this is overwhelming, or even at like the DD level of like, what a like particularly insightful experience. But it was in that same zone and in that same ballpark. And it was Andre Holland is the main central character, and he's excellent in this. And you know, I mean, I recommend it. I feel like it might be an Antonio movie. I'm like, this could be a movie that I feel like Antonio would crop up and be like, oh, like what a movie, like about there's no special effects, nothing like explodes. It's just, you know, people living their lives. So Not my sort of overall take is this was I just had the 5 movies, which has sort of been my go-to choice for the last few years. And usually there's one or two that I'm like, I really liked this. Like I had a great time. I didn't have that. Like everything felt a little bit like a step or two down, and it seems like that isn't that is my experience, but that is reflected in what people who went and saw 30 or 40 movies also similarly felt. This was the maybe one of the last dominoes of the strikes is there weren't a lot of independent movies that are currently ready to be shown at Sundance because they would have had to have been working during that time of the strike. So yeah, it's not the highest peak compared to some of our earlier Sundance episodes, but I like this movie. This was really nice. I don't know if it's going to blow up or go anywhere, or it's not going to race to award season next year. But I think it is a nice, pleasant hour and a half, hour 40 for people to spend to just see a grown up story of people interacting.
The main praise I had heard about this was it features adults acting and talking like adults. Really,
Yes.
like in terms of a realism of people's behavior as opposed to more contrived. So, also apparently, like there's a love triangle that's the other thing that low key maybe got spoiled for me when I was listening to a podcast about this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think I refer to it as referring to it as a love triangle, like maybe doesn't do justice to the complexities of the dynamics of it's not just I have to choose between this or these two people are fighting over this one person. It's just there are 3 main characters who are kind of interacting with each other and meeting and bouncing around off, not meeting, but bouncing around off of each other. And it's easy to refer to it as a love triangle. That's again maybe not accurate, but yeah, there's again, this feels like faint praise, but it's just like there's never a point in the movie where it's like, well, I don't know why that person did that, like that, or they just did that to create drama for this movie to have an engine to keep going. It was like these are all realistic things. Even when a character makes a bad choice, it's like you can see why in this moment where they are right now they're choosing to do that. And yeah, for people who lament that there are not stories told like this, here's a romantic dramedy for again for grown-ups. It's not going to sell out multiplexes, but it was solid.
Well, I talked to Jasmine actually earlier today, and Dan Dissinger, our friend Dan Dissinger, about the Sundance Film Festival and how it's. I think it was kind of a hard year for the very practical reasons that you mentioned, about like the films that were released under these circumstances, but also I think that it's a difficult uh, time to really highlight experimental indie films coming off of a holiday season that gave us The Brutalist and Nickel Boys, right? Um, those just just amazing swings and triumphs. Um, so this is my first time to do the online thing. Like I was a little jealous you guys did it those past years. I was like, well, I want to try. I want to watch a couple. So I dipped my toe in, and I'm glad that I did. But I think that I wasn't quite as hungry for like this session as perhaps I would have been in previous years.
And that seems to be like the general consensus that critics feel like for feature films, this was a weaker year. Documentary apparently still going strong, but and still had a lot that may end up at the Oscars and stuff like that. So, yeah. But then for every person who said that, there was someone who was like, "No, this was great." Like, like how dare you?
It feels like everyone was like, yeah, it wasn't that strong except for these 1 or 2 movies, but everyone had a different 1 or 2 movies that they were selecting.
Oh, interesting. All right. My pick is going to be a film called Ricky. Did either of you see this? Okay. So this is a film about post-incarceration life. And so it's Ricky is the title character. He just got out of prison, and you watch him kind of try to figure out how to get a job and how to make sure he meets his parole meetings and stuff like that. And it really is, like, I would say that in general it has some pacing issues. Like on the one hand, I'm like, oh, you want to show his day to day life in a very extended way, right? To sort of build up towards what it happens in the third act, which I won't spoil, obviously. But on the other hand, I was like, but do we need every single one of these scenes? Or like, it feels directionless at certain points. And I'm like, I went back and forth between whether or not that was helping the movie or hurting it. But in the end, was like very, very emotionally impactful, I feel like. And in particular, because at first I was like, oh, this is going to be pretty standard sort of post incarceration narrative, or like, isn't it hard for someone who's, like we talked a lot about those issues with Sing Sang, right? And like, and so like a part of me in the first like 30 minutes was like, oh, I know what this is going to be. But then it kind of reveals a slice of the situation that I had never thought about or seen before in a movie. And I'm being kind of like vague because because I don't know how much I want to spoil it. But basically it sort of shows that like if you're in prison for long enough, it really stunts your development and your maturity. And the movie is so powerful in how it just shows that and kind of brings that up in very pointed ways, as opposed to like sort of having long monologues about it. It stars Stefan James, who I believe was in Beale Street Could Talk. That's what he's known for. But Cheryl Lee Raff is in it, and she's incredible. She doesn't get that much to do, but in the few scenes she's in, she's like powerhouse, like holding the whole room's attention kind of speeches. And so, as she plays the parole officer, and so she's very tough and but also cares a lot, right? It's very like it's again, it's not like nothing, not a lot about this movie is what you would expect, but at the same time it surprised me in certain ways. And it just like certain scenes just pack like an emotional punch, because it really shows how his fate and his success and like him messing up is really on a knife's edge constantly. Like you're very stressed out to be like, no, don't stop and talk to that person, because then that's going to happen, and then you're going to miss your meeting, and then oh my gosh, like I got very stressed out on behalf of this character. But I liked it a lot. I'm trying to remember who. Let me pull up the Wikipedia page. It is directed by Rashad Fret, who I'm not familiar with, but it's a directorial debut. That's why.
I mean, this is one of the ones that again, like, is being bounced around, as some people were like, felt not that connected to it, and other people were just like, no, this was quite good. This was one of the highlights. So I wish I had seen this one instead of a couple of the ones I did see, because this one seems a lot more, I don't know, substantial and intriguing. So that's good.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend it. I think it was good. I wouldn't have said that when I started watching it, but by the time I finished, I was like, oh wow, this is one of the good ones. All right. Why are you laughing?
I don't know why. It's one of the good ones.
Okay. Antonio, what was your second movie that you saw?
The second movie was Omaha, which is directed by Stephen Cole Webley. And my understanding is that this was fairly polarizing. Um, it stars John Magaro from past lives. He played Greta Lee's husband in past lives, and so that alone had my interest. I wanted to see him as a lead, um, and the scenario seemed like something that I might be interested in. It's basically something happens. The premise is that this family is coming off a sort of a tragedy, and as a result, they have to get into their car and get on the road, and they're on their way to Omaha, hence the title. Um, there are the two actors who play his children um, are excellent. Molly Bell Wright um, plays the daughter, and she is, like I don't know. It's really difficult to judge child performances, child actors in particular. How much of that is just a deft director, but I don't know what he captured as this kid, what she managed in the course of this, I think really made the movie. Um, the young actor who played her brother, Wyatt Solis, was also excellent. Hmm. So yeah, the premise is an evicted family goes on the road, and then it just gets worse. um, it's it's a lot of scenes of like just John Magara, the father, go into stores to just get basic things for his kids and then like fumbling through his wallet and finding like very little there. Um, and you know, that's always going to affect me. That's always going to make me feel something. Um, but it happens a lot in the course of this movie. And
It
so
does.
I think it does. And so I think that I think it's a kind of movie, and once you realize what's happening, and I think a lot about how you receive the movie is going to depend on how you find, especially like anything that that sort of deviates from the story that you expect. I'm not sure that there's a lot that does that here for me. I will say, I texted you after I texted basically, I knew that Jen had gotten a ticket to this as well. And so I was like, I normally don't say this to anyone who's about to watch a movie. I kind of want to see whatever. But because my wife, I watched it with Janine, um, and I have never seen her like cry this hard. It wasn't like a muffled thing. It was just like all out, um, you know, just it was just destroyed her. And it was like multiple times in the movie until the ending, which destroyed her. So it was hard to watch. Like it was to the point where by the end, when she asked like, "Did you cry?" and I said, "Well, no," that she got angry. She was quite angry. Um,
You monster.
um, I know. And the thing is like I definitely felt a lot in the course of this movie, but there was also a part of me that was like, is this good? Like, is this am I feeling things because like I'm a human being and I can't help but feel things at a certain point? And there's um I think the thing that it brought to my mind was this idea about artful restraint. Like this doesn't have a lot of restraint. It just like goes for everything every single like thing that it can pull out of you, it's gonna go for it. And in the moment, sometimes in a movie you're like, oh no, are they gonna go this? And they do. Like that the choice is always like maximum emotion. Um, and for some people like that is kind of a relief, and like that they want that, and it's great when art can do that, but I don't know, something about the method by which it did it and the repetition in which it happened, um and then um the sort of the reason that it's in Omaha is sort of revealed eventually, and like that's maybe not the revelation that I think that actually didn't went counter to the purpose of like this being like a more artful, I think, representation. I'm not gonna, that's very vague, but I'm trying to avoid spoilers. So anyway, um, I think I'm glad that I watched it. The performances I thought were good, and it was really fascinating to sort of at least like contemplate and to how this movie was doing what it was doing and whether that was a virtue. Um, so anyway, I wish that we could, talk in a more spoilery way. But I know one of you did see it. So, um, Jen, what were your general thoughts?
I mean, this movie is straight up emotionally manipulative. Like I don't
Yeah,
you're being very polite about it, but I sort of resented it by the end
sure.
cuz I think what you're describing I don't usually like. I if something I feel like naturally earns the big ugly cry, then that's
Yeah,
great. That's fine. I'm not against that. But if I feel like what you're, and this is very much what you're describing, if I feel like the movie is really making sort of not fetishizing the like let's make you really sad, but no, it's there's a word I'm looking for that I can't think of right now, but sort of like being really demonstrative about its Like, isn't this going to make you so sad? Isn't this the most gut wrenching thing that we could possibly show you right now? Right.
Yeah.
And I think the structure of the movie, I think, is a huge part of that. And that's sort of where I disconnected from it a little bit. Cause yes, I'm not heartless. Like, I definitely got really emotional in the scenes that you're supposed to. But at the same time, because of the way the film's structured, it didn't actually take me, and this might have been aided by the fact that you warned me that it was super sad, but it did not take me very long to understand why they were going to Omaha. Like,
Yeah.
I figured it out pretty quickly. And then I
Yeah.
was just like, wow, this is just this, like, because the movie kind of acts like the last scene is going to completely shock you and pull the rug out from under you and be like, I didn't think that they were going to do that, but at, but no, like, they're not fooling anybody. I don't know. Like, or at least that's how I felt about it. It felt, instead of building slowly the tension and then having a shocking thing at the end, to me it felt more like dragging it out because I had sort of understood what was going on pretty early. Um, Also, there's a subplot with a dog that I'm not okay with. Uh, like, let's leave the pets out of it. Like, let's like, and I can't say anything else without spoiling it. But yeah, I don't know. Like, but at the same time, this movie was like very beautifully shot. I feel like some of the shots of like there's one scene. This is not a spoiler. There's one scene where the kids are flying kites on a salt flat. It's gorgeous looking. Like, it looks really nice, and it has that kind of um I want to say Terrence Malick kind of look to it a little bit of, like, I don't know. And all three of the main actors are really, really good. It's just, I just felt, I was like, really?
As someone who didn't see this, and so, but of course I'll still say something. I feel like the way that I'm hearing the two of you describe it, and the other sort of written and other podcast episode descriptions I've heard, whether it was people who liked it or pushed back on it, is it sounds like a description of a horror movie that people who love horror movies are just like, this was great. It made me feel so, like, it made me feel these emotions. And like, it went to that like grisly place, whatever, it went as dark as it could, blah, blah, blah. Except instead of horror, it's just sadness. And so it's just like, it's kind of that, like, there's people who like in a genre to be like, just speed bag my heart, like just emotionally devastate me, and that's what I want. And then there's people who think that, like, okay, well, now you're just gonna make me cry, but I'm not gonna respect you for it. So I'm very curious. I don't know, it sounds like a gauntlet to have to go through, but
A rite of passage.
yeah.
Yeah, and so it had a lot of potential. The subject matter, I feel like, has a lot of potential, because I think that telling
Sure.
a story about a family that becomes so disenfranchised and so brought to the brink that sad things have to happen and choices need to be made. That, I feel like the kind of economic circumstances surrounding the story, I feel like, are really worthwhile to tell stories about. But I don't know. This is like over dramatizing it. And then the other thing is that there's information provided at the end of the film, which, again, I'm going to be super vague about because I don't want to spoil it, that really kind of, to me, undercut any sort of attachment that I
I
had to
agree.
any of these characters.
I agree. It made it feel like a sort of like after school specially kind of like whatever. It just put the wrong. I mean, like, yeah, it didn't do what I think it was intended to do, or it made the exercise feel like I went through all of that to get this.
Yeah.
um, to get this lesson. Like, yeah,
And
no,
again, it's
I agree.
presented in a way that's supposed to be like an aha kind of revelation of, like,
Yeah,
well, don't you feel like you know more about the world now that we've told you this? And it's no, I felt the opposite. I was like, really? Like, sure, that is very unfortunate and very sad, and like, but again, everything felt like it was to make me really upset, and for the
right.
sake of it, as opposed to like for some other artistic goal. But
Right, right. And like to contrast this using a John Magaro film, right? Like Past Lives has a punch at the end of it, and a sadness. Like I was destroyed. People around me were just a Janine too, and but part of what made that like that felt like a director earning it, and it felt like such a revelation and an epiphany. And it's also though that it was like part of the sadness was because there was so much light and so much brightness like throughout that movie that that there was a real depth to the sadness. Um, but here it's just sadness. It's just like constant sadness, right? There are very few like there's the kite, but even the kite, I was just like, this is making me sad. This is the saddest kite um, flying scene I've ever seen in my life, right? And so, yeah, that sort of relentlessness of it um just does it just feels like again like an exercise and not like not like the best art, right? Like just like it lacked balance. um and and I agree that the ending sort of note made just was the wrong note to end
I wish listeners could see the look on PT's face as we're describing this movie. He's vacillating between like concern, and then bemusement. Like it's really quite good.
I feel like I'm never going to watch this.
After we stop recording, we can spoil it for you, and you don't have to watch it.
Okay. I just hope everyone gets their steaks at the end of the movie.
So.
I assume that's why they're going to Omaha, is they want steaks. All right, I'm gonna change. I'm gonna change the temperature from this very sad movie that brings everyone down to what I'll put as my my number 2 movie, and it was the movie By Design, which was very weird in a way that I thought was really enjoyable. I got the ticket for this because of the log line. It remains the best log line of any of the movies at this Sundance and maybe at any Sundance that I've done the online thing for. And it is a woman swaps bodies with a chair and everyone likes her better as a chair. And you know what? That's what happens. She Juliette Lewis is a woman who really likes a chair and wishes she could afford it and ends up body swapping herself and the chair. And we see her adventures as a chair and also the adventures of the chair in her as a body. It's very weird. My sort of quippy letterbox review is usually that when people talk about, oh, I saw a movie and it felt like a play, it's it's sort of a His Three Daughters type thing where it's, oh, there's all these characters in a room and they're talking and it feels like I could have watched this on a stage. But this is a movie that's like a play that feels like the 11 p.m. experimental theater show where there's a lot of movement and interpretive dance mixed in with very weird ideas and physicality movements and like themes more so than like storylines. But I don't know if it really fully works, but it was great to see this swing, I guess, this attempt to make a movie along these lines. It was written and directed by Amanda Kramer, who, according to Wikipedia, is best known for the films Lady World and Please Baby Please. I don't know her for those movies because I have not heard of those, but I am confident that they exist and people know them. Again, the main character is Juliette Lewis. Let me make sure I'm pronouncing this right. Mamadou Ache is another main character who ends up in possession of the chair for a stretch of time. Known, of course, for a lot of things, but everyone's favorite movie from last year, Kinds of Kindness. He was in each of those segments, and also was the voice of the main character in Elemental last year. So I guess that was 2 years ago. Sorry, I don't know what decade we're in anymore.
I was gonna say, you're mentioning an animated movie. I'm already thrown off. Like,
it's fair enough. And it's again very odd. There's sequences where I'm like, I wish this weren't in here because I don't know if it really adds anything. But it's the kind of movie where you're maybe I'm a little more comfortable taking the bad with the good in unlike, say, a very sort of serious narrative movie, like the way you all were describing Omaha, where like if that movie is unfolding and suddenly there's elements where you're like, oh, I don't like that, like that can really drag it down. But when it's this sort of very conceptual and kind of leaning more experimental and heightened movie like this, that if there's like a 5-minute thing where you're like, I don't know. But there were all these other sequences where I was like, this is great. And like, it feels like it is tapping into the, like an experience, the experience of living as a woman in society and trying to be like, how do I want people to pay attention to me? How do I want people to not pay attention to me? And what is that? What is that like? And what does it mean to sort of live a curated life and live by design, I guess. So weird. I don't know if everyone would like it. Again, I think it's a sign of how I didn't have as strong a time at the Sundance experience for this to come in as my second movie. This would usually be that like borderline movie at like 3 or 4 where I was like, well, I still had fun, but it was, I don't know if it really makes sense or will connect. I would think it's worth checking out. If any part of that, of what I just said or what you see about it appeals to you, it's worth checking out just to see what you get out of it.
I think Antonio would like this one.
Yeah, the premise sounds very funny. Is it funny? Because like your description actually doesn't sound funny.
It's funny, but it is like it's very dry and
it's not that funny.
and heightened. I mean, I think there were parts that were quite funny, but it's not a comedy. Like again, it is experimental theater where it's like haha, like isn't the conflicts of whatever the conflicts of society, isn't that droll? It's more at that level than it's haha, I had a good time watching this. I'm laughing at all the humorous events that are unfolding. So yeah, I would not describe it as being funny. It's absurd, but I don't know if it's necessarily funny.
Yeah, I think absurdist is the best way to describe it, because I think any humor that I derived from watching it was like the awkward chortle of like, wow, this is really weird. Which can be good. I went back and forth a lot while I was watching this as to whether or not I actually liked it. And I think part of it I really appreciated as a piece of theater, PT mentioned, because it does have that sort of like, there's people sitting around a table and the conversation they're having is very like social commentary saturated but very stilted and in some places very like melodramatic, or very like, the way it's delivered is with a lot of artifice, I think. And so if you're on board with that, then I think you'll be along for the ride. And there is a certain amount of surrealism because, as PT mentioned, like she literally becomes the chair. So it's like, and I actually really appreciated sort of taking what would have been in another film a metaphor of like, don't we treat women like they're furniture? And it's like, no, let's watch how that happens. Like, let's see that happen. So I think there's a little bit of, PT mentioned Kinds of Kindness. I actually thought about Kinds of Kindness a lot as I was watching it, not just because it had one of the actors from that movie, but because of the tone. Like the tone I think is very similar to Kinds of Kindness. This is not as gruesome or violent or brutal as Kinds of Kindness, but it has that same kind of like like sort of staged, absurd, farcical quality to it.
Which is,
and if you really liked chairs, a lot of pretty chairs in this movie.
Good design in the movie, which is smart because it's called by design. I will say, and Jen, you decide if this is too much of a spoiler to cut out. The thing that like always made me like laugh or chuckle was how everyone in her life, when her Juliette Lewis's body became just basically inanimate, like she's breathing, but she doesn't move. And she's always just like placed. It's like a Weekend at Bernie's kind of thing. And no one notices. like everyone, like all her friends still come over, but because they're so busy like talking at her, her mom comes over and like goes through and like throws out all of her shoes because she thinks she doesn't have good
That was
taste in
probably the
shoes.
scene I actually laughed at the most.
And so it was just
The
like,
mom scene.
but also just Juliette Lewis like getting into these weird positions and then just having to not move for like 5 minutes at a time was I thought was enjoyable.
Oh wait, I actually really liked the scene where you actually meet this is a spoiler now too, but the you meet the designer of the chair,
Mm-hmm.
who the actor of that I saw in another Sundance movie whose name I can't remember right now.
It's Udo Kier.
Yeah, okay, yeah, he was really good.
Yeah.
But it's also like culture, art, commodification. Like if you like Andy Warhol, there's a part of this movie that will appeal to you. You know what I mean? Like it's hard to describe.
I thought the vapidness of that, like what people thought were very enlightened conversations at that dinner party, I thought that was also enjoyable. But you know, this isn't like again, if we are going to compare it to Kinds of Kindness, which I think it's interesting. I saw another movie that I think is more like Kinds of Kindness, or in the Lanthimos zone. But if we are going to compare it to that, like I thought Kinds of Kindness was much more successful. I'm also the only one who liked Kinds of Kindness. So it's hard to be like, go see By Design. It was like the less good version of something most people didn't like. But, I thought it was, again, like potentially fun, but it feels like it's going to be on like Mubi someday. And someone might be like, I'll watch that. And they'll be like, okay. And that's it.
Multiple critics who talked about this movie said that it should have just been a short. So make of that what you will. But the thing I'll end on for this movie is I couldn't tell if the people in the movie were insufferable or if the movie was insufferable. That was my conflict.
The people definitely are, and I think the movie did wear out its welcome a couple times, and that was also some of the choices of like it kept folding in some new like elements and ideas, and eventually it was like no, just deal with what you've got. You've got like 10 things. I don't need 3 more. Like just deal with these 10 things. But yeah, I think that's fair. I think that is there's a decent chance people will watch it and be like, nope, I don't like this, and I everything about this is annoying.
How long was this movie, and how long were generally your Sundance movies? Because mine were, I only saw 2, but they were both like 90 minutes and felt like they both needed editing.
Yeah.
Like they needed to be even shorter.
They were all about an hour and a half for me. This was 92
Okay.
minutes for By Design, and probably could have been 60 or 70.
Okay.
So my second film was my favorite by a pretty big margin, and it was Sorry Baby, and this is the film that got the splashiest acquisition. It was acquired by A24, and then to no one's surprise, apparently, who was at the festival, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is clearly an A24 movie." It is a directorial debut by writer-director and star Ava Victor, who I was not familiar with before. Apparently she's done some other comedy stuff, some people had known her, but she was completely unknown to me.
I guess she's a TikTok presence.
Oh, that would
none
be
of us
why.
are on TikTok because we're adults, but she's a TikTok person.
I know adults who are on TikTok.
Do you?
I do. I'm married to one.
Well, okay. I was like, are they adults? Have they really grown up? I'm just kidding.
Yeah. There's lots of useful things on TikTok. Anyway, this is not an episode about TikTok. So this one I really like. So the premise of this movie is the main character, it goes to grad school in English literature. So I may be biased, obviously, right off the bat in terms of the story, but it's in a small New England town, and the story is kind of, it checks in and out of different phases of her life, and she's the only one who kind of stays behind in the town. And then there is the description of it is very funny because it's like a very bad thing happened to her, because they're trying not to spoil it. And the story kind of revolves around that. So it's a lot about coping with trauma and recovering from trauma, but it's also very, very funny. And it navigates kind of that very serious subject matter, but very kind of dry humor about it. really, really well and very smoothly. And it's a directorial debut and does not feel like it at all. And the other thing, I'm not going to take credit for this, but I've heard multiple, at least 2 critics compare her to Greta Gerwig crossed with Phoebe Waller-Bridge.
Oh, wow.
Oh my goodness.
So yeah, I know, right? Antonio's like, I'm listening.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I found it very, very funny, and it deals with the central traumatic event, I think, really elegantly and kind of innovatively. Like, I don't think I've really seen it treated that way before. There's one scene that takes place in a jury duty courtroom that just like slayed me. It was so so good. So yeah, I would really highly recommend this. And there's a lot of jokes about like English nerd stuff that I think you would probably appreciate. And there's also a cat, which was advertised in the. If you see the still photo, there's a kitten. So bonus cat. This movie basically had everything I wanted. I would say. And then Naomi Ackie is in it. She plays the main character's best friend, and Lucas Hedges is in it. Lucas Hedges, who hasn't been in a movie in I don't know how long. He's very cute in it. And then this is never going to happen, but best supporting actor, I'm already campaigning for John Carroll Lynch.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He's great.
He has a very small,
He's a very good actor.
He's basically only in one scene, but he just like knocks it out of the park. It's so good. It's him with a very thick New England accent talking about sandwiches. It's so good. It's like so yeah, I'm worried now about overhyping this, but I really enjoyed this movie. I don't think I might be spoiling our future conversation, but I don't think it's necessarily going to be a breakout in the way that like Past Lives was necessarily, but it's one of those things where you're like, oh, I'm really excited to see more things from this filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
It could be her like breakout thing, right? Like this is the thing,
right? Like it maybe this movie doesn't go very very far,
right,
but like that will get her the
project.
next movie that will. Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
This is it's all going to the World's Fair, and the next one is I saw the TV glow.
Sure.
Of like,
yeah.
oh, like now it's more money and more attention.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah. I just went back through our text messages to look at the list, and like Jen sent a list in the days before, like 1 or 2 days before the online tickets went on sale, and it absolutely is. It's the 5 movies I chose, and then these 3 better movies that you guys have talked about. Which Plain Clothes. Actually, I don't know if Plain Clothes is on this list, but Sorry Baby and Ricky. And then Omaha, which I guess that's I may question mark whether that's better per se, but yeah, it feels like this was Jen called her shot before the tickets went on sale. She had Sorry Baby on the list, and this does seem like this is the one that people were talking about the most from, and maybe that's because it was the one that got the most hype and was also available online, so more people were watching it. There are a couple of movies which maybe we'll get to and talk about that were in person only that also were people were very positive on and got some deals and what have you. But yeah, this feels like the one that everyone's talking about, and so I'm most excited to see this once it's available wherever it'll be available. And this is the A24. Got it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep. If only Greg were here to shill on their behalf, but they need no help. All right. So I hesitate to open up the floor to this, but were there any shout outs that you wanted to give to other movies that you saw? Not give the full spiel, but just like give a quick.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like we should share the ones we saw just to note, but I did see, and Jen, I believe you did as well. It was the grand jury prize winner, Atropia,
yes.
which was written and directed by Haley Gates.
Tony's laughing at me. I mean, this is just like, it was a very disappointing movie.
Yeah,
I got so excited about it, and then I got so disappointed.
It's the first time I ever purchased the movies in advance, and then they announced the awards, and it's like, oh, I bought one of the award winners. Like, this is great. Usually the awards come out and it's like they weren't online, or I chose something else. So I was like, oh man, everything's coming up PT. This is going to be great. And this movie is very okay. at best. It was like the idea is really interesting. I can see, based on what I saw and based on what you all are talking about, that like I can see why maybe this one like grabbed the attention of the jury, including our beloved Celine Song, writer director of Past Lives, who was one of the 4 people on the jury this year. That it's like it's saying something, but also it's funny and it has sort of some actiony elements, but and it has these characters. It's a movie that is set in a American, on American soil in the sort of middle of California. It's a military training facility that is designed to look like a village that can be redone to anywhere where American troops may go and end up in like an actual city or village situation where they might be doing their militarying, their soldiering, and they can train and they can practice with like the actual environments, and the actors who are hired to live there for a week or two at a time and are given roles every sort of cycle to be like, okay, a new set of troops are coming in. Now you're going to be the person who sells bootleg DVDs. You're going to be the person who is the butcher. You're the person who's making mustard gas bombs like up in the in the hidden place, and they're looking for you, so you don't want them to find you. So it's this sort of like, it's acting and theater and role play, and all these interesting dynamics that just don't really add up to much and just feel like uh, it's it also feels like and this is obviously a weird phrase to use here, but it kind of feels like it's fighting the last war. It's very much like, wasn't the invasion of Iraq a mistake? Like, shouldn't George W. Bush be held accountable for these terrible things he's done? It's like, well, for sure, but we're past it. We don't know what to do now. We got to do something else. Like this feels like an outdated idea that I believe the director said she was trying to make a documentary about this for a while and then ended up making it a feature instead. And it feels like something that was a good idea maybe like 10 years ago. And now it's just like, all right, like what are we actually doing?
This one also has a factual title card at the end that
it does.
that doesn't help.
Yes.
Much like Omaha's. All right. Actually, I think a fun thing to kind of, and then I want to move into like some Oscar talk potentially. I actually ranked all of the movies that I saw.
Okay.
So I saw 7 movies total. My number 7 was a movie called Bunny Lover, which I tried really hard to like and just couldn't get on board with it.
I joked earlier about TikTok. We may just be too old for Bunny Lover.
I think, yeah, it's not meant for me. It's not made for me.
It's the story of like a 22-year-old living right now, and I just I didn't connect with it. The bunny has incredible eyes. The bunny of the title. Just like anime bunny. Incredible. And nothing else really worked in that movie for me.
My number 6 was Zootropia. Although, now that we're talking about it, it was close. My number 5 was Omaha. My number 4 was By Design, because I was like, you know what? I got to give it to this movie. We're trying. Like, my number 3 was actually a movie we haven't mentioned yet called Bubble and Squeak, which most people, I think, did not like, but won me over because I'm a sucker. And I thought it was very cute.
I listened to the This Had Oscar Buzz guys talk about Sundance. I think the episode came out yesterday or earlier today. And they, I think it was Joe Reed, summarized it in a way I hadn't codified it, which is, it was not a good movie, but I still kind of liked it. Like, which I usually, like, that's usually for like, oh, I watched some, spaghetti Western, or I watched some dumb like sci-fi movie. And like, it's not good. Like, I wouldn't recommend it as a piece of cinema, but like, I still had a good time, like the whole time. That's how I felt about Bubble and Squeak.
It's Kirkland brand Wes Anderson, but you know what? That's still fun.
See, it's so interesting. And this is where I want, if Greg were here, we could break his brain. I thought it was Kirkland brand Yorgos Lanthimos. Like everyone, like I'm seeing descriptions of Wes Anderson, but it felt much more like Yorgos to me. Especially with the camera moves and the waterfish eye and just the sort of very stilted. I mean, I guess what it says is that Yorgos and Wes are not that different. Again, apologies to Greg. Don't crash your car if you're driving right now. But they're in a very similar zone of artifice.
Yorgos is just European Wes Anderson?
Wow. Mediterranean Wes Anderson, maybe we'll say.
Okay.
Wes is so Parisian now.
Oh, that's true. So maybe I can't make that comparison. Yeah, this had a great cast that was very fun. I still enjoyed it. Yeah, it's not the best thing ever, but I kind of locked in and understood what it was trying to do in a way that made me appreciate it, even if it wasn't very good.
And so, Matt Berry from What We Do in the Shadows, among other things, apparently has an incredible Werner Herzog impression, which is how he executed his character. Very, very great.
Yeah, and apparently, like, everyone knew that. Like, I watched the Q&A afterwards, and one of the questions was Matt Berry channeling Werner Herzog, and the director goes, "Oh yeah." like it was a known thing, which I thought was great. Antonio, the premise of this movie, just so you have some context, is there's a couple on their honeymoon that gets accused of smuggling cabbages into a country where cabbages are illegal, and that's what it's about.
There it is.
Sounds fun. And this is a Steven Yeun. Is it Steven Yeun?
Yeah. He's not in it very much.
No.
It's a cameo, okay. I would say.
Oh, okay.
I think but
I think he was he's a producer on the movie.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, he plays one of the immigration officers. So he's very funny. Yeah.
See, it's funny because it's a country that has these arbitrary rules about when you can come in and not come in, and execute strict controls over the populace through these rules. You'll love it. It's very funny.
I actually really liked it as a movie about marriage. I thought it actually, that's the thing. It got very close to like making a good, saying something interesting about marriage and couples and like what people's hopes and dreams in their lives and kind of how that has like intersects with the real dynamic they have with their partner and also smuggling cabbages like this.
The most memorable scene is about that, and I think was very effective and affecting. And again, I don't know if the whole thing came together in the way that it really wanted to, but I'm with you. I liked it more than it seems like the pervading wisdom has
most
been.
People are like, this movie's trash.
Yeah, and I think it's like, not necessarily great or even good, but I think it's worth again your 90 minutes that you're going to spend with it.
Okay, so then my number 2 was Ricky, and then my number 1 was Sorry Baby. So that's my ranked Sundance list. Very small compared to actual critics who went and watched like 57 movies. We're not there yet.
What's your rankings?
I didn't really do a ranking.
Yeah, I didn't give this as homework, so this is a surprise.
I mean, but it's probably very similar to Jen's in that, like in our overlap. Bunny Lover, Atropia. I think I would put Bubble and Squeak then by design, but it's for the same reason of just like I'm rewarding by design for doing something weird. I don't know if it worked or if people are going to like it, but that's up there. And then Love Brooklyn, which again is like, that's a soft number 1 for me, like where it was just like, yeah, no, it was pleasant. There's no like real problems with it, but I don't think it's like, a spectacular splash. So that was my more muted experience this year, as opposed to earlier years when there was, again, usually 1 or 2 movies that I left feeling very strongly about.
So what I want to kind of wrap us up with is Oscars watch. I'll play the music. Why not? There we go. So, do we actually think that this question doesn't necessarily have to apply to just the movies that we saw, but do any Sundance movies have Oscar chances for next year, do you think? Or any performances? Because sometimes the Sundance movie the movie itself might not be hot ticket, but a performance might get a little bit of traction in awards race.
The buzz I was hearing was Dylan O'Brien in a movie called Twinless, which is one of the 2 movies we referenced at the very beginning that got taken down from the online streaming platform because it was illegally pirated and shared scenes from on social media. Apparently naughty scenes where naughty things were happening. And so that got spread around. And It was a love scene, and that's why people shared it. So it was that, and then it was also a Selena documentary that had clips pulled from it, and so they took it down. Which I'm only mentioning because that was again one of the big stories out of Sundance, and also makes me worried that next year there's going to be like 3 movies available on streaming. Because
this might be the
all
last
people will be
episode
there.
we do about this.
Yeah, unless we get funding to go to Sundance itself, wherever it may be, to Park City, Salt Lake City, or Cincinnati. So
Don't forget Boulder. I said Boulder at the beginning.
I thought Boulder was out. I thought it was just
Oh,
those 3
really?
now. I don't know. Oh, no, I trust you more than myself.
I mean, people were still saying Boulder when I was listening to podcasts and stuff. So for those of you who don't know, listeners, there's the big sort of like, oh, what's going to happen is that a bunch of cities have made bids for Sundance to move. Sundance has always been in Park City, Utah, with like some screenings in Salt Lake City. And so this is a big deal because a lot of people are like, you can't do this. Like, this is Sundance. Like, Sundance and Park City are synonymous, right? Like, a lot of people feel that way. But I think it's probably just like a size problem would be my guess. Like, they've outgrown Park City. So what I've heard is that if it were to stay in Utah, they would kind of switch so the primary city was Salt Lake City, and it wouldn't really be in Park City at all. But a lot of people are like, what's in Cincinnati? It's a very coastal elite attitude to have, I feel like. And then a lot of people are, well, hey, what about Boulder? Because that at least still has high altitude and snow. And so maybe it will sort of be like we're still in Park City. So I don't know what's going to happen. It doesn't matter for us. We're watching the movies online.
It's true.
But,
the coastal mecca of Park City, Utah, instead of good middle America, Cincinnati. But
no, what I'm saying is like coastal
know,
elites who like going to Park City for Sundance are like, I don't want to go to Cincinnati. Like, what's over there? So
it's in between Bengals and Red season. There's nothing to do. There's nothing going
on. So you mentioned Twinless. So the premise of that movie is a support group for twins who have lost their twin. So they are a lone twin. And Dylan O'Brien, if I remember correctly, played Dan Aykroyd in Saturday Night, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And
he originally was from Teen Wolf, which I think is why everyone wants to watch the sex scene with him on the internet.
Right. I think, was he in Maze Runner as well?
Oh yeah, I think so. So he's like
another thing.
So he has like teen heartthrob status,
right,
for a generation of people. So, and that may ruin virtual Sundance for the rest of us. So, don't pirate movies, people.
Or at least keep it. Don't put it on social media. Like keep it like in the dark web, where people don't see it.
But yeah, the reviews for that have been very, very positive. People seem to really like it. So whether that, I don't know if people have gone so far as to say it has awards chances, but they are very positive about it. The main movie that I have heard that did not play online, it was only in person, that has the most, it sounds like, Oscar chances is a movie called Train Dreams, which stars Joel Edgerton and Felicity Jones. And apparently it's about like an 18th century logger. And I actually don't know anything else about it other than that. But like, I don't know what problems does he have as a logger, or like, but it's a period drama. And people really like it. People are saying that Joel Edgerton actually for Best Actor is a possibility. So, and in a way that like people who didn't really appreciate him before are now like, wow, we didn't know Joel Edgerton could do this. So that would be the kind of narrative. The only problem now though is that the Netflix is the one who acquired it, which had left a lot of people scratching their heads, being like, wait, this movie's never going to be in the theaters. That doesn't seem right, because apparently it's like a big sweeping period piece. So. Yeah,
and it's. Did you already say this? It's based on a novella by Dennis Johnson.
I did not say that because I didn't know that.
Very well regarded
okay.
Author, and it's by the the same duo who did Sing Sing. Not the
Oh,
not
that's
with
right.
the
Okay.
people
Greg Quidar.
from the program. Well, it's Clint Bentley and Greg Quadar, and I guess the way they do it is one of them directs a movie and then the other one helps them co-write it and get it off the ground. So this is Clint Bentley's movie because Greg Quadar was the director last time for Sing Sing. So they've switched over to now, and it does feel a little bit like, we just went through this whole thing where it was like Sing Sing, like, where's Sing Sing? Why is this not on streaming anywhere? We can't get it on VOD. What's going on? Oops, it didn't get any nominations. And now they've gone in the other direction of like, it's just going to be online. It's just going to be on Netflix. You'll have it. It'll be available, but it's going to just probably disappear into the recesses of the algorithm with very few people seeing it. And yes, it is apparently, even I thought Sing Sing was very well shot, but I guess this is very beautiful vistas and very picturesque cinematography around this, and folks were saying this is the Sean Fantasy thing was, I wish I was seeing this on a big screen, and now it seems like very few people will, unless you get to the Paris in New York or the Egyptian in LA, where Netflix puts its movies up for its runs to get eligible for awards.
Any other movies that we heard had a lot of buzz?
There are these documentaries that like that's
What
sort
are
of
those?
Well, look, it does feel like maybe we've been dropping the ball in what we're paying attention to. Because I did just go through. This is partly why I didn't know if you had talked about Dennis Johnson, because I was making a quick list of the movies from last year to see like what carried forward, and I was like, there were a bunch, but in terms of narrative features, I think the only ones that had Oscar nominations, A Real Pain is the big one that was in competition last year, and A Different Man was a premiere, which again only got the makeup nomination, but that was in there for a while. There were some other movies bubbling under that didn't end up with nominations. Our beloved Dee Dee was an audience award winner last year at Sundance. But the sort of big success story from recent years, and that includes this past year, is in the documentaries. And between the U.S. and the world documentary, it's I believe, four of the five movies nominated for Best Documentary Feature were in competition at
Wow.
Sundance last year. Porcelain War, Sugarcane, Black Box Diary, and Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. And also the winner was Daughters of the U.S. competition, which had been presumed was going to be nominated, and was like, that was a big snub. So it almost, I mean, I don't know what the votes were, but like, it feels like it could have been 5 for 5. Plus Superman, the Christopher Reeve movie, plus Will and Harper, which, were highly touted. So this year, it feels like, people are saying strong things about. I mean, it seemed like people liked the Selena documentary before it got pulled down. There was a documentary called The Perfect Neighbor that is trying to piece together sort of like a whodunit documentary about what happened in a situation, but everything is through body cam footage from the police that were investigating it. So it's not about like a police incident, but it uses body cam footage to sort of show the like different perspectives on it. There's a movie called Predators that is about, does not star Adrian Brody, on a planet of predators from the movie Predator, which is the last time there was a movie called Predators. Instead, it is a documentary about the show To Catch a Predator, and sort of unpacking and analyzing like the legacy of that show and sort of what was happening with it and maybe how we think about it. And all accounts were that it really did a good job of peeling back a lot of layers around something that we all sort of took for granted, I guess, like 15 or 20 years ago as just a thing that existed. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple other. Andre is an Idiot, and what was the Zodiac Killer Project, I think is the name of the other one. So these are all just ones that got kind of kicked around as being, worthwhile documentaries people connected with, and the ones that leave Sundance with some buzz. That buzz can frequently carry forward to next year at this time when it's Oscar talk.
Yeah, I feel bad now. I usually make a point to watch at least one doc in my list, and I think the preview coverage was really lacking, probably because LA was on fire and people had other things they had to deal with. but so I didn't get the intel about which, if I had to watch one documentary, which one it would be. So I think I just didn't choose any. Like, but I saw Navalny at virtual Sundance, and that went on to win Best Documentary Feature at the Oscars. So, but then other years I end up watching a documentary about moths. No one talks about afterwards.
Well, my memory is you really liked the moths.
I did like the moths; they were cool.
Yeah. It's not all about the awards, Jen. Sometimes it's about the moths.
I know. Anyway, so the only other ones that we haven't mentioned, then we can wrap up, I think. The other narrative that's coming out of this year's Sundance is that no one bought any of the movies, which is not great. Not what you want. So Sorry Baby went to A24. Train Dreams went to Netflix, as we've already discussed. Allison Brie and Dave Franco, who apparently are married. Yes. I didn't know that. They made a body horror movie called Together, which has been described to me as The Substance, but for couples. I don't know what that means. And and that went to Neon. And then another movie that's like a stalker thriller is called Lurker. This is probably what Antonio was actually trying to watch. Or you know what I mean? Like when you were trying to pick a thriller.
Find a thriller.
That went to Mubi. And then Peter Hujar's Day, which people are very lukewarm on, because it's basically is it Ben Whishaw?
Yeah. Okay.
It's the director of Passages, which a lot of people like.
Well, Ben Wishaw's an actor in Passages.
Yeah. So it's the director of Passages and also starring
Ira Sachs.
Ben.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
But apparently, it's just Ben Whishaw like smoking a cigarette and talking endlessly. So people were not into it.
Wait, that's a contradictory statement.
I don't know.
That sounds great.
As Rebecca Hall. So I think I heard today that Ben Wishaw's character has, like, I'm gonna get the numbers wrong, but let's just say 80 pages of dialogue, and Rebecca Hall, who's his co-star, has like 3.
I see. No, that's a problem.
So maybe that's a problem. Like that it's, I don't know. Anyway, because Peter Hujar, I think, is a famous photographer. I might just be making stuff up now. But that's it. Like, those are the only sales that I know of for feature films. So usually there's a lot more.
The big picture was talking about how this might be, this might just be a weird blip because of like where things are and between the strike last year, the wildfires this year, that there was things that led to it there not being as much action in terms of acquisitions at this, but that there's been concern for a while now that there is sort of the peak time of streaming services splashing money around to acquire properties and acquire stories and get these movies. And you could go to Sundance and be like, yeah, I'm going to get like a payday for this. And if the streamers have decided to cut back on their content, not spend as much, or try to do it more in-house because that might mean, they get more profit for things, then this may be the case, that there's the smaller distributors and smaller independent studios that used to exist were crushed under the weight of all the bigger streamers. This may be hard to believe. Tech companies showed up, undercut of the small mom and pop operations, and now have destroyed the market where they've come in. So yeah, it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see going forward. Is this a harbinger of real problems for this level of film, or is it just a weird blip because of strange conditions?
I mean, I had this thought where, to me, I'm like, oh, maybe the sky is falling thing that we did last year, which didn't pan out, because I feel like most of us had the reaction of like, that was a good year for movies. Like, what, like, considering all the things that were working against it, that was a pretty good year for movies. Maybe it's just this year that's going to be the fallout here. We just were delayed a year in having that panic.
It is interesting because a lot of the panic was around like big blockbusters and just like, we don't have like this franchise or that franchise. And so now we're going to have, 3 Marvel movies, a Superman movie, and all that stuff, but maybe we won't have like a brutalist or an Honora that emerges. But there's always something. There's always something that comes up.
True.
Also, it's Sundance, so it's quite early. There's so many film festivals to come. I think there's plenty of great indie films still to come.
Okay, good. Thank you, Antonio. Always the voice of optimism. I love it.
Did I tell you I actually went to this? I've been to the Sundance Film Festival, like I've been to the like live. I've gone. But when I went, the only person who would go with me was my friend who is Mormon, and he was like, I don't want to watch anything that has profanity or nudity. And I was like, it's gonna be slim pickings. um, So he went away for a day, so that's when I watched like a bunch of movies, and then when he came back, I was like, well, I can find like an animated movie or like a documentary.
Nice.
Yeah.
So he's probably
I
not
would
the
love
one
to.
pirating the twinless
I
sex
don't
scene.
think so. I don't think
Okay.
so. I don't think so.
All right. Antonio, I'm so glad that you could get in on the Sundance action this year and join us for this episode. Where can folks find you? And I know there's only one place.
You can find me on Letterboxd at Elefano, AELEFANO PT. Where can people find you?
You can also find me on Letterboxd at PT McNiff, PTMCNIFF. You can also find the show there at LTR Pod. You can also find us on Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky at The Long Take Review. You could send us an email, thelongtakereview@gmail.com. Or you can subscribe and follow wherever you get your podcast, wherever you're listening right now. Why don't you just hit subscribe and keep listening to our future episodes? Jen, where can folks find you?
Find me on Instagram and Threads at Sopchockchai, SOPCHOCKCHAI. Also on Blue Sky. I always keep forgetting that now. And you can find me on Letterboxd at Qui-Gon Jen.